Okay, so let's talk about how to document Python functions. Now, the documentation is really, really important because remember I said that this gave us code reuse? We plan to use this later, right? Well, how do you know what function does, right? You wrote it a year ago. You wrote it 6 years ago. Okay, unless you document and you say this is what this function does, you'll never be able to reuse it. It's just too difficult. So let's talk about how to write some documentation. Here's what should be in documentation. You should always have like a one-line description. This function adds the numbers 1 to n. I mean, it needs to have something like that. Okay, that's sometimes that's enough. Okay, depending on how complex the function is. But you at least need to have that, okay? Now, for functions that are a little bit more complicated, and I don't think we're going to write any of those in this class, maybe one or two, okay? But functions that are more complicated, you can't explain with a single sentence. Go ahead and give a sentence that does the best possible job, and then actually elaborate on that, maybe a paragraph. For really complex functions, maybe you need 2 paragraphs, okay? You're never going to need any more than that. If you need more than that, you probably have too big a function. Let's break it down, okay? But you may need a paragraph to explain really what it does. One line just won't cut it, okay? You always need to explain the parameters, right? If this function takes m and n, okay, so what exactly is m? What exactly is n? Let me know, right? Because I'll forget. Later when I try to use this function, I won't know what they are. I won't have to be guessing, right? Let me know little things. If we're looping, do we go up to n or up to n minus 1? Which one, right? That's the kind of things that I need to know if I'm going to use this code. The function might return something, right? What does it return? Right? Again, be clear. This returns the sum of all the elements. Something, right? It returns something. Let me know what that is. Okay. Now, if the function does something weird, okay, maybe you have some information that you don't need to know to use the function. But if you want to change the code, then you probably need to know this. This is right. Then what we do is we write that in a separate section called notes. Right. So hey, this is like an advanced information, right? If you need it, here it is. If you don't need it, just skip over this, right? That's what you're telling the reader. And finally, you always should have examples. How do you use this function? So for example, if you confuse the length of a string, then have some example like length of A, B, C, D, E, that's 5. Length of A, B, C, that's 3. Just so people know how to use it, okay? So let's go through that. We want to have a one line and maybe a longer description. So here is define sum up to n, right? Here is the documentation. And you'll notice that we have 3 double quotes, right? Now, 3 double quotes is actually just a way of starting a string in Python. We've seen strings before. We've seen them with single quotes. We've seen that you can also use double quotes, right? Well, you can also use triple quotes, right? Double quote, double quote, double quote. I guess that's a hexa quote, okay? Now, we need to have that specially because what that means is that the string goes across multiple lines. So notice here we ended the line, here's another line, and so on, right? And we go until we find another set of 3 double quotes, okay? So that's a way of saying this string splits across lines. If you simply have a new line in the middle of a regular string, you'll get a syntax error, right? Because there's a really good chance that you simply forgot the closing double string. So Python wants you to know right away, okay? But this is your way of telling Python, hey, I know that this is a long string that spans multiple lines. I meant for that to be that way. So Python doesn't give you a syntax error. Okay, so that's what the 3 double quotes mean. Okay, so the very first line, and we do it right after the 3 double quotes immediately. Don't do the new line. Okay, immediately there's nothing in front of it. We put in the one-liner right here. Find the sum of the positive integers up to and including a given bound. By the way, I could have said including n, right? By convention. I don't like this convention, but it's a Python convention, okay? By convention, we never use the variable names in that one-line description. I don't know who made that convention and why they did it, but it's stuck, okay? So that's why they say up to n. I said up to a given bound, okay? Now here is my paragraph summary. And that just says computes the sum of the numbers 1 plus 2 plus 3 and so on up to n, right? That's a good place to actually use the variable names. Notice that the variable is put in back quotes. Those aren't single quotes, those are back quotes. And actually that gets formatted in a special way to show that it's code, right, when it gets done. Okay, now let's talk about parameters. For parameters, we simply have the word parameters and then we include a whole bunch of minus signs underneath it. It's kind of like an underlining. the heading. Okay, that's the way it's supposed to look, right? So parameters and then a bunch of minus signs. And then we say the name of the parameter. Notice that the parameter is n. We have n, space, a colon, it's Python, and then space, and then the type of the parameter. This is supposed to be an integer, right? I don't want to say sum up to n of double quote Fred, a string. No, I can't do that, right? I can't even do sum up to n of 3.14. Okay, it needs to be an integer, right? So that's what we say right here. Call me with an integer, not with something else, right? And then in the next line we indent, and then in the next line we give some kind of a description of what that parameter is. That's supposed to be the upper bound for the sum. N is inclusive, by the way, so we go up to including n. Okay. Below that we say returns, right? That is the name of the heading. We make sure that it's a heading by putting those dashes there. Okay, and then we give the type. Notice that we don't have a name colon because it's just a return value. It doesn't have a name. We say return whatever, okay? So we say what we're returning is an integer. And then, just as before, new line and then a tab to indent, and we say what exactly is it that we're returning. It's all those numbers up to n, okay? So that's the next part of the documentation. The parameters, the return value. Okay. Now here the notes section. I'm actually putting notes in this particular function because the obvious way to write it is 1 plus 2 plus 3 up to n, but instead we're doing n times n plus 1 over 2, right? A programmer may look at that and go, what the heck, right? What's going on, right? Okay, granted, that's not a big surprise, but still, it's a surprise. So you can actually put an explanation here to somebody. I notice that now I'm thinking about somebody who's looking at the code of the function, not somebody who's using the function, somebody who's looking at the code of the function and telling them, hey, it's all right, I know what I'm doing. I know this really does compute what you want. I'm using this fact. And it's actually a mathematical fact, and that is actually mathematical notation. It's a special mathematical notation called LaTeX. If you're going to be studying computer science, mathematics, engineering, science, any of those kinds of things, go ahead and learn LaTeX, right? That's not the point of this class. We're not going to do any more of it, but that's just, hey, this is something you should know. It'll help you write mathematical notation. Okay, finally, we have to have some examples. Okay, so here are the examples. Again, it's a section. So we say the name, the heading, that is examples, and then we have that dash dash dash, kind of like an underlining for the heading. And then what we'll do is we have 3 greater than signs, not 2, not 4, 3. Okay, and then we have a space. It has to be a space. 3 greater thans and then a space, and then you put an expression like sum up to 5. Okay, so that says if you call it like this, so now I'm letting somebody know how to call it, right? And then underneath that in the next line, you put in the value. Sum up to 5, that would be what, 15? Okay, so we do something like that, right? Now here, I'm actually really helping the user because I'm telling them, sum up to 0, well, of course that's 0, right? Sum up to minus 1, hey, that's going to be 0 too because I go 1 plus 2 plus 3, you know, I never hit minus 1. Sum up to 4, that's 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, that's up to 10. Up to 10, that's 55, okay? At that point, I'm not doing it in my head anymore. But yeah, those are all the values that I expect, right? So that lets me know how to use it. That's why that's really cool. Okay. Now, the other reason that is really cool, and this is a Python thing that I happen to really love, okay? The other thing that's really cool is that Python can automatically test your code if you give those examples. It will actually run the examples and make sure that they return what you say they did. All you have to do to make that happen is kind of at the bottom of your file, put these 2 lines. Import doctest. Doctest is a Python module that tests the documentation, right? And then you say doctest.test my modules. Right? And it will automatically go through your code, find all of the examples that are in the comments, and go ahead and execute them, and make sure they return what you want it to do. So in here, by the way, if a test pass, you don't see anything. It's like nothing happened, right? Because the Python philosophy is, hey, if everything is working, I'm not going to bother you, right? And have you actually read some report that says everything went well. I'm just going to disturb you when something goes wrong. So if everything goes fine, you won't even know that it's running. Sometimes that makes me nervous. What I like to do is I introduce a deliberate bug, okay? And that way I can run it and I'll see the error and go, okay, so it is testing. That's good. Okay, so I'm paranoid. Now, here is what happens when you get it wrong, right? So you'll get something like a failed example, okay? I ran sum up to 4. I was expecting to get 10 and I actually got 6, okay? You might speculate, why 6? Well, I did 1 plus 2 plus 3. I forgot to add the 4. My range is incorrect. Okay, that could be an organic bug. That could have actually happened. In reality, I didn't have that bug. Okay, I changed the code so that this would happen. Okay, But I just wanted to show you this is what happens when you have a bug. That tells you it went wrong. Now, whenever you write code, I want you to do this because you probably wrote some up to end as part of a bigger project. When you're working on the bigger part of the project, you can be sure that sum up to end is working correctly. So you're not debugging over here. You're debugging there where the bug probably is. Okay, so that's a really great help to your programming.